Bitcoin supply shock is incoming. Don't get fooled by a bear market. Bitcoin always has bear markets. And exactly in those corrections is where the intelligent investors are preparing for what's to come. And that's why my guest and I are saying even the smallest amount of Bitcoin, if you have it in self-custody, puts you in a very small elite club. And Brandon Keys, my guest today, makes the argument that 0.01 Bitcoin puts you directly in the top 1% of Bitcoiners. Only about 48 million people hold more than $1 in Bitcoin right now, which means there are 8 billion people still out there not holding $1 in Bitcoin. You are already now in a very elite club because you are aware of Bitcoin and you own Bitcoin and you understand Bitcoin in 2026. Enjoy. What are your current thoughts on the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I started getting into Bitcoin maybe around I started learning 2016 to 18 when I was in grad school. I was listening to Preston. The price was a lot lower back then, but I think the biggest difference between previous cycles and now is everybody had a lot higher expectations. I think, when expectations don't meet reality, that's when people start to get really upset. And I think that's what we're seeing in Bitcoin. I mean, me personally, I thought we were going to go higher than 125 last year. I mean, especially when we hit over 100K before the halving. I mean, I think everybody was all high and mighty. We saw, TradFi coming in. We see all this money coming in. But I think the reality is when traditional finance starts to come in and financialize a product or attempt to financialize a product, of course, Bitcoin's going to overtake the financial markets in the long run. But when traditional finance comes in, that's when things get a little hairy and don't exactly play out the way everybody thinks, because there's just so many fiat games that they can play. There's derivatives market. There's all these different markets now coming in trying to take a little portion of Bitcoin or, get swallowed up by Bitcoin. That, the volatility isn't quite as there as much and people were selling off. But I mean, I'm as bullish as ever, Robin. If you look at it just at outside of the price and you list everything that happened last year, it's like, how could you not be bullish going forward? So I think it's all just rookies coming in. They bought at 120 and they're like, all right, we've been hearing about this Bitcoin thing for years, and now we finally decided to buy at 120. And now, we're hearing about it because it fell 50%. So.
Yeah, it's. I also think about it. There was a comment yesterday. Literally, I read it, and he said all the negative comments probably bought within the last 12 months of Bitcoin. Now they're disappointed because they were promised 250, 300K, and now they got 60K, 70K, 80K, whatever the price currently is. I think people are just having a different kind of the expectations were not met. But I think it's so astonishing for me that we can't focus on the opportunity that the current market really gives us. If you think about the fundamentals being so strong and then the price being down, this is exactly what you want as an investor. You want to see, if you think about a company, you want a company that is bleeding in the market and the fundamentals are just skyrocketing. That's the best possible way to buy in. And with Bitcoin, we just see the fundamentals being as strong as ever, and the price breeding 50% down or 40, whatever the percentage is from the all-time high. It's astonishing for me to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, Bitcoin's money and we're all going to eventually need it, right? So think about something that, I don't know, people think that they need right now, like toothpaste, right? If toothpaste is normally $5 and you're seeing it at the store at $2.50, you're probably going to be like, all right, I'm going to need toothpaste eventually. So I'm going to load up on a bunch of toothpaste while it's 50% off, right? But I mean, people just aren't looking at it that way right now. And what I think is actually kind of interesting is when you look at the breakdown of the wallets, like how much each wallet has, Bitcoin is laying out pretty similarly to the way traditional wealth has. And, last dip, I made a couple of videos on this, that the number of wallets with zero point 0.1 Bitcoin, so 10 million sats, actually went down during the dip, meaning people who came in, maybe bought, it was at that time, maybe around $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, see it below that, they sold off. And the amount of institutions with 1,000 or more Bitcoin went up like crazy. So, I mean, what does that mean? It means that all the traditional investors, the TradFi bros, the big money managers, they're seeing this as an opportunity, and the plebs who we're yelling to at all times, Robin, they're the ones selling off. So, I think that we really need to keep shouting this message that Bitcoin is still the most asymmetric bet you could possibly make. It's a fixed supply asset, and maybe it's all of us here. We haven't gotten through to them yet, Robin, or maybe their conviction just isn't there quite yet. But we need to keep yelling to everybody, especially people that are dealing with inflation, that Bitcoin is a 4 to 5 year asset. I'm meaning, like, you're going to buy and hold this thing for 4 or 5 years. It's savings technology, all of the little one-liners that you've heard throughout the years. And it's true, because, there's a reason why HODL has been the biggest meme in Bitcoin. It's because, for times like this, when it goes down, you're not going to be selling. Don't sell your Bitcoin to BlackRock. Don't sell your Bitcoin to Michael Saylor and Strategy. Like, these guys are going to keep on buying, because they're going to have so much money or so much access to the traditional fiat system, where you and we got to keep holding on to our sats, man. We got to kind of try to avoid selling off as much as possible. So I think, even though the sentiment is negative, I think it's very bullish going forward, and we need to keep hammering this message just to not sell, because there's so many different tools out there where if you need liquidity, you don't need to necessarily sell. Obviously, do it within some safe rails and everything like that. But you know, this is when, people get rich. When people got rich in 2008, Blackstone and all these big guys came in and bought a bunch of real estate when everything crashed. And now's your time to do the same with Bitcoin. You just don't need the $100,000 to come in and buy a house. You just need to start DCAing on the way down, and you'll be very happy you did so on the way up.
This is actually the perfect way to look at it. It's, if you are understanding Bitcoin and you are convinced of the fundamentals, which you will be if you study it closely and deeply, you see it as a major opportunity. And I think you actually, maybe I confused that, but I think you put out some videos on the massive opportunity of even holding a small portion of Bitcoin, and how massive this puts you already in the ranks of Bitcoiners when Bitcoin becomes a major asset in the future. I remember correctly, I think.
Yeah. So, like, the Bitcoin, like, wealth, if you kind of look at the amount of the scale, it's actually pretty drastic. Like, in order to be in the top 1% of people, of Bitcoin holders, not just Bitcoin holders, of just people in general, all you need is 0.01 Bitcoin. So right now, that's like less than $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, and you'll be, in the 99.9% of people just in general. And, over 95% of the wallets have less than 0.01 Bitcoin. So, I mean, if you really just break it down, all you need now, what it prices at 70,000, like $600 to $700 worth of Bitcoin, and you'll be in, you'll be in a class where, essentially it's more rare than millionaires. Actually, I think you only need $1 worth of Bitcoin, and you'll be in a class less than the 62 million millionaires globally. So, I mean, I think that there's like 50 million or 52 million wallets that have Bitcoin just in general. And out of those 52 million wallets, like, all you need is really just $1, and you could be in a more of an elite class or more of an exclusive class than having $1 million net worth, which $1 million when we were kids, that used to mean something, Robin. But unfortunately, that doesn't mean too much right now. I mean, you need to throw around the $1 trillion number to really get people's attention. But, at the end of the day, these $1 trillion markets, they're eventually going to figure out Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is still a very early asset. I mean, it's like 1.5 to $1.8 trillion market cap now. I'm old enough to remember when Bitcoin was a $2 trillion asset, not too long ago, right? So, but I mean, the things that we're seeing just in traditional finance, from the hard assets, gold, silver, all the ways that people used to traditionally obtain wealth. It honestly, like, there's no easier way now to make money where you could do it on the internet. You and I are talking across the world, and there's no easier way to obtain wealth than just to simply buy a small portion of Bitcoin and put it in cold storage, as little as $1, and you'll be in a more of an elite class than the millionaire class. So all you got to do is get off zero and start stacking ASAP.
This is an amazing message, and I love that because I think everyone that will control their own UTXOs in the future, and for the people that might are confused with UTXOs, it's basically you just having control of actual Bitcoin on the base layer, not on exchange, not on Lightning, not on anything like that, just on the base layer, control over Bitcoin, whatever the amount is, over a dust amount, I would say. Have a little bit have. I mean, put at least like $100 or $1,000 in there if you have that. But even like if you only hold $1 in there, you even are in a massive elite because you are aware of Bitcoin right now and you own Bitcoin right now, which is a very small percentage still. And people don't get that how early we are. I think we always have to make this assumption that people, just because they heard Bitcoin so since like a couple of years now, they think, yeah, like it's been around, it's established, but it's actually not. It's when you if you go out there on the street. I saw today a clip which was really fun. I will not play it because it's German anyways, but it was a German game show, and there was a question where people can get to the next stage here, like want to be a millionaire. I think is a show in America that is called like that. And they got a question: how many Bitcoin are there? And it was like 21 million, 35 billion, or 69 trillion. And she went with 69 trillion, and it was like, oh wait, so people really have no clue. Like at the most basic foundation, I think almost everyone that is listening to this probably knows that there are 21 million Bitcoin. And if you go out on the street, if you ask 200 people, I think maybe one knows, maybe two people, if you're lucky, knows such a simple fact about Bitcoin. And we're not talking about anything complicated. And so I think we have to kind of reiterate, and your example is amazing for that, how freaking early we are in this whole situation.
Yeah, I was looking it up, so I made sure to get the number right. But it's 48,484,476 wallets have $1 or more worth of Bitcoin. And like I said, there's 62 million millionaires in the world. There's over 8 billion people in the world still, Robin, and we only got just 48 million that have $1 worth of Bitcoin. And it's funny that you bring up, some game shows and other things like that too, because I think, the sentiment was, all right, we've had these ETFs, we have Coinbase, we had, essentially the Super Bowl, not this past one, but the year before, we had so many crypto commercials with Coinbase and all of these other things popping off. I think it's interesting the differences between last year and this year. We had a Coinbase commercial this year, and it was like a karaoke one. And I saw a bunch of videos of people just literally booing and yelling at the TV when they figured out it was a Coinbase ad. So I think, at the end of the day, we're still so early. And if you're buying your Bitcoin on a Coinbase or one of these exchange, sure. I mean, it's great. It gives you access to it. But, the true power of it is understanding that it is a fixed supply asset. And I just don't think humans are able to comprehend that because, I mean, I'm talking to you through this microphone. Maybe there's a fixed supply of these microphones, these laptops here. But, at the end of the day, if we want more, we could just build more, right? The only thing that we can't physically make any more of is Bitcoin. I mean, there's gold, there's silver. We could probably figure out how to make some fake gold in laboratories, fake silver in laboratories. Hell, the Winklevoss twins were telling Dave Portnoy that Elon's going to go and mine gold off of asteroids and some crazy things at one point in time to try to convince him about Bitcoin. So I think, the human mind just can't comprehend actual scarcity. And, that Michael Saylor had a clip not too long ago that said when he first figured out Bitcoin, he was having like cold sweats at night because he was like, when I figure this out, like if somebody else with big amounts of money is actually going to figure this out, they're going to be scooping up at a crazy rate faster than him. And let's just face it, nobody's catching him now at this point. And this is now probably going to be the richest man on the planet just because of how much Bitcoin him and Strategy have. And he was worried about all this at one point in time. So, if Michael Saylor, if all these other people are worried about how much Bitcoin they're able to scoop up, this is the ultimate buying opportunity. And you should just be scooping up. And yeah, like our panel that we did in Bitcoin Amsterdam, we are still so early, Robin. It's crazy.
I love that with Luke also. I mean, gosh, I have to get Luke back on the podcast. He was in the meantime on the Beast Games. I don't know if have you watched the Beast Games? Like a
I
very
haven't
side
watched it,
topic.
but yeah, I didn't watch it, but I did see the pictures of him going around. They called him a crypto content creator. So I mean, just because of that, we're still early, man. They're not differentiating between crypto and Bitcoin still. So, but allegedly, Mr. Beast is getting into Bitcoin. I see, tweets go viral all the time about that. I mean, at the end of the day, I think like we just got to keep making the content, and eventually we'll crack into the mainstream and get there. I mean, we've seen some athletes get into it. We've seen, some other people start to get into it. Some famous celebrities that aren't known for being Bitcoin celebrities start to get into it. So I think at the end of the day, we're still early, but we're cracking in there. So shout out to Luke for the Beast Games, man. I'll have to go and watch it.
I normally don't like those shows, but for some reason I love Beast Games. Like I don't know what it is, but like the social aspect, the psychology aspect of it, it's just like so fun to watch. But I might be the only one here. It's really interesting. You brought up the Coinbase one because I just wanted to note that because I found it funny that Coinbase with their ad is rugging the listeners off the ad of like they are trying to like a fun thing and then they're like, oh, it's Coinbase. You lost all your money with crypto, so sorry, we're rugging you also with that song. It was a fun one. All the reaction videos online, but I think it actually worked a lot. Everyone talked about Coinbase, and we're still talking about it. It was because there are a lot of opinions out there on the Coinbase ad afterwards. Did it work? Was the Coinbase marketing bad? I've seen people talk about that had nothing to do with Bitcoin. And I was like, that's huge. That's huge for like a Bitcoin exchange ad to be so popular and people keep talking about it. And so it was from a marketing standpoint, really, really successful. The only thing that I kind of see when people and Bitcoiners see they had a chance to really promote Bitcoin, had a chance to like put some nice educational material around Bitcoin out there. But nobody would talk about that. Nobody cares about that, unfortunately. So I think they did a good job, even though it's a lost opportunity. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, Coinbase is very interesting because, we saw the Super Bowl ad, but I mean, their earnings just came out the other day and they literally did like a TikTok thing where Brian Armstrong's talking and then they had, what is it? One of the old iPhone games just kind of playing through the top as like kind of a distraction while you're listening to the earnings call. But if you actually did listen to their earnings call, Coinbase had one of the worst quarters that they've actually had. So I think, what does that show? It shows that retail, the sentiment that we kind of started off the conversation is very bad because look, for better or for worse, Coinbase is usually a first touch point for a lot of people to come into Bitcoin. And I think, at the end of the day, when they start to come into Bitcoin, they get bombarded with all of these different, shit coins. that's a big problem because of what Coinbase basically encourages. It's like the Robin Hood of crypto, essentially, where they're gamifying crypto. They're trying to make you pump and dump and buy all these different things. And I think, you know, Brian Armstrong has kind of realized, like, maybe I made a mistake. I should have gone into Bitcoin and just Bitcoin earlier. But he's getting oh so close to that money printer that it is a little scary. And I have my guard up with him because, I mean, I don't know if you watched any of the World Economic Forum stuff, but, Davos, all of those elites, we have, BlackRock owns a big majority share of Coinbase. And Brian Armstrong was talking about tokenizing economies. And he was over there, I think it was like Bermuda or a country like that he was meeting with government officials talking about tokenizing their entire economy. And it just is it's very weird how quickly he was able to go from essentially hating governments, hating all of these things, hating banks. But now in the United States, he's filing for bank charters. He's meeting with government officials, and like he's essentially like, saying they're putting millions of dollars behind certain lobbies and certain bills and things like that. And he's taking credit for like tanking certain crypto bills and stuff like that. But when you listen to all the things he says, it's never about Bitcoin. It's about DeFi. It's about stablecoin yield. It's really getting farther away from the point. And I think what he's doing is essentially using blockchain to kind of get in and get closer to that money printer and essentially still play the fiat games. I think Bitcoin's going to win eventually, but this like little weird transition that he's doing to get more stable coins in and everything else, I think is something that we should all have our guard up too. And, at the end of the day, Coinbase has a giant monopoly when it comes to Bitcoin and in crypto, at least in the United States. I mean, they own Circle, which is the biggest stable coin in the US. USDT obviously is now, or USAT is now starting to come in. But that wasn't, available for United States residents for the longest time. But now that Bo Hines is at Tether, they're starting to get over. But anyway, it's beside the point. Coinbase has a bunch of marketing dollars. And Brian Armstrong has met with Trump. Brian Armstrong is just essentially all over the place. But when you look at the actual company, it wasn't doing anything that was anything to write home about within the past quarter. So, I think it is something that we should all be watching out for. And, at the end of the day, Bitcoin in the United States, if you're not holding it in self-custody, outside of maybe buying it on like Cash App or Strike or, one of these other platforms outside of Coinbase, Coinbase essentially touches everything. I mean, they've got 9 of the 13 Bitcoin ETFs under their custody. And it's essentially a giant monopoly that I think we should be all very much watching out for and being very cautious with how Brian Armstrong is moving and keeping a close eye on him, to be personally honest with all of this.
Yeah, there's two aspects to that. Is the honeypot that Coinbase is, and we all talk about how many Bitcoin Seyr has, but some of the Bitcoin that Seyr has are with Coinbase, and Coinbase actually has more, not themselves, but holding for other people. But there's like something very interesting in that debate where when Coinbase or like the Bitcoin ecosystem with Seyr, Brian Armstrong, and all the big people that have big companies within Bitcoin, when they are getting very close to the political arena. I mean, we've seen the pictures of Seyr behind some party of Eric Trump and doing all those things and talking all of a sudden about Trump in almost every single of his presentations. Even in this last earnings call, Trump was in there. There is two sides of the story, I think. There's the one thing where you can make the argument that they are Bitcoiners defending the rights of Bitcoin and bringing it into the political arena. So we are not getting taxed to death and all of those things that the political arena potentially could do to Bitcoin. But then there's the other side of it where is the Bitcoin ecosystem and those players kind of getting captured by the political arena and getting too close to the money printer, so they see the benefit of it and not wanting to get rid of it. And I'm not sure what it is. I know no matter what it is, Bitcoin will be fine long term because nobody can manipulate it. But in the short and medium term, it could be very interesting to find out what is actually who's capturing whom here.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at like the Trump administration, the way that they're moving is very calculated, I'll say, because I think what the way that Trump had probably the most unique presidential kind of mix up here that we've ever seen, right? I mean, he was president from 2016 to 2020. Then he literally had a 4-year break to sit on it, try to calculate what he would have done differently and kind of learn. And the unique thing about Trump was he wasn't a political figure before. I mean, sure, maybe you could say he was because he was, so rambunctious, but he wasn't really that way. And I think it's when you really take a look at the first things that he did when he got into office, he passed the Genius Act almost right away. So of course his sons are really into the Bitcoin and crypto space. I mean, it cringes me to say that a little bit, but I think having the Genius Act passed, why did they do that, right? I mean, if you look at the Genius Act, it's essentially just a stablecoin bill. And what has happened between now and then? Well, stablecoins have essentially started to come to the US. They realize that essentially that the United States, their number one export is dollars. Okay, well, if the dollars are going digital, how do we make these digital dollars essentially back the current physical United States dollars? Well, we require them to buy US treasuries and all of these other things. Well, you see all of these other countries globally losing trust in the dollar and selling off US treasuries. So we can make these stable coins essentially buy up these US treasuries and thus prop up the fiat game that we've been playing. So I mean, it's kind of ironic that we're having, the stablecoin demand in countries like Turkey, Argentina, Venezuela, where they've seen hyperinflated currencies essentially prop up the US dollar even more because, these countries, they're begging for something like the US dollar. And so they're using these, USDC or USDT or whatever it is. They're using these stablecoins, which are essentially, buying up the US treasuries and thus propping up the US economy, which we're just, going into a debt spiral, but they're essentially just prolonging that debt spiral by having these impoverished countries essentially prop it all up. So, I think the way that they're moving is very calculated. And, I think they're a smart guy. I mean, when you really take a step back and look at it. And, I've been of the opinion that I don't think the United States has been ever, I guess, let's say, anti Bitcoin. And before, you guys are starting to come at me in the comments or something like that, I think that, even the Biden administration, they didn't hate Bitcoin. They just wanted to know what you did with it. And I think at the end of the day, they wanted Uncle Sam to know, hey, Brandon went and bought coffee with Bitcoin on this day, so we need to tax him for it. And I think that was their essentially play. And I think Trump has realized that, okay, there's a lot of, money in this Bitcoin space now. So we need to be a little bit more friendly with how we move it. And there's so much innovation going on in this industry that, we want to make it something that's advantageous. And I think too, taking it a step farther, Trump's been a real estate guy his entire career. And part of, what real estate guys in the United States love is essentially all the tax benefits for it. So I think it's interesting that you're seeing his sons coincidentally get into the Bitcoin mining space. And then now you're seeing, increased friendliness and tax breaks when it comes to Bitcoin mining, that, are just oh so similar to the tax breaks that you get in the real estate space. So I think at the end of the day, all of these things are connected. And like you said, I think it might be the honeypot. Maybe the stablecoin stuff is maybe, let's say, a short term negative. I would say for like Bitcoin adoption to become the peer to peer exchange. But I also think like we need a little bit more time to build to make sure that we have everything in place for the readiness of Bitcoin becoming a peer-to-peer exchange. Because I mean, let's face it, Lightning in certain wallets, it's good, but not 100% perfect. And Bitcoiners are willing to sit there and hey, go to a grocery store, go to some place and buy, pull out your app, go, Face ID or whatever it is, and then scan. And then pay for coffee and wait for all that, where the average person just wants to double tap their phone and Apple Pay. So I think we're going to get to that point eventually, but I think this whole movement, the stablecoin bills and everything else, is essentially going to allow us to, I guess, allow the builders to build on Bitcoin for a little bit longer. So I think the Trump admin has been very calculated. And I think what, being pictured with Seyr and everything like that, I think it's good in the long run. But at the end of the day, these guys also made a bunch of money in the fiat system. So they're still very fiat minded at the end of the day.
The first thing that every Bitcoiner does, and the most important activity that every Bitcoiner keeps on doing, is buying Bitcoin. And I personally use Relai to buy and sometimes also spend or sell my Bitcoin. And there are two main reasons why I do so. The first one is it's Bitcoin only. They do not do any shit coins. They do not do any cryptos, any stocks, or anything else. This is a tool, an app that is fully focused only and solely on Bitcoin. The second one is self-custody. They give you the keys to your Bitcoin the moment you buy them. You never give them the control over your Bitcoin, and you don't have to trust them because you can verify that you and only you have the keys to your Bitcoin. There's no third-party risk. There's no freezing of your assets. There's no rug pulling. There's nothing of that. Download Relai, the app, on your phone, or go to relay.app on your browser and use code Robin to save fees and get cheaper Bitcoin. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. It's the intersection between fiat and Bitcoin is really interesting. I'm curious what you think is kind of coming for Bitcoin, not in the next months, but in the next years, because we see that the governments of the world are increasingly suffering around the fiat system. They see that inflation is running high. But at the same time, the debt is going really high, and at the same time, the economy doesn't really translate how they wanted to translate. Usually, when the economy is not going good, they are lowering interest rates to power up the economy again, and then there's like a little bit of high inflation. But we now have all of the worst things, and so they slowly, I think, getting the bill of running a fiat system. What do you think is kind of coming towards Bitcoin? If I think we all agree, I think it's not really a discussion that this train is not stopping. With like this whole debt and government and money printing and inflation is. I think even outside of Bitcoin, outside of the Bitcoiners, they slowly see that the whole fiat system is kind of broken. But what is kind of happening towards Bitcoin and also gold, and how do you see it in the next couple of 5-10 years happening to that, when we keep in mind what is happening to the fiat system?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So I think, when we see what happened in gold and silver markets, right? I mean, it's not out of the question that Bitcoin can go parabolic. I mean, we saw silver move 40% in a day. Silver, a $4 trillion asset, which is more than double the size of Bitcoin. So I don't think the parabolic moves of Bitcoin are done by any means. But I think where we are right now is very similar time to, like, when I look at history in the 1970s in the United States, we had massive amounts of stagflation. Inflation was high and jobs were low, and they weren't creating a lot of jobs. We're at this weird intersection right now with AI, and the way that it's just revolutionizing. And if you're on Bitcoin Twitter right now, I'm sure you're seeing people talk about Claude and using that, and I'm starting to use it as well. And I think people are starting to get more efficient with that. So we're going to be in this weird, I guess, let's say, kind of period where, maybe there aren't as many people hiring because they're trying to figure out this AI thing. And, I think if the people that don't innovate and kind of capture, their wealth as much as possible by either saving in Bitcoin or, learning new skills through AI, I think they're going to get left behind, at least in the short term. And we're seeing the lowest hiring rate for like recent college graduate males. And so I think, that's not a good trend that we want to see, right? So I think people are going to have to really learn and figure things out. But I also think the Trump admin, like I said, they're kind of a administration that isn't super predictable. Because I think everybody thought, when Trump was going to bring in this new Fed chair, that it was going to be a guy that says, "Hey, money printer, go burr. Let's make all assets go up." I'm not 100% sold on that, because his main stance before was, I need to fight inflation. But I mean, let's face it, he wouldn't have gotten the call if Trump and Kevin Warsh didn't meet before and say, "Hey, buddy, we need these interest rates a little bit lower." Maybe he'll go at Kevin Warsh a little bit publicly, but I don't know if we'll see the 0% interest rates that we'll see, or that we saw during, 2010 to 2020 time, about that decade. So right now, I think we're kind of in a weird impasse in this next 6 months or so. And we've got the midterm elections coming up. I think Trump is very smart and knows that, the S&P 500 and Bitcoin are kind of how two different groups look at the economy. The S&P 500 is for everybody older than the millennial generation, the boomers. They all look at that. So if the market isn't doing well, they equate that to the economy. And millennials and younger, we all look at, Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin isn't doing well, we assume the market and the economy isn't doing well. Obviously, that's not 100% the case, but I think that, this administration looks at that, and they want to make sure that the midterm elections come, and that the Republicans can still remain in power. So I think we've got a weird kind of geopolitical game that they're going to play, but inflation is still running hot. So, but everybody lives in these 4-year cycles. So I think we're going to have a lot of unpredictability when it comes to the Bitcoin market here. And I think that's what we saw last year in 2025. Everybody assumed, oh, Q4, myself included, we'll have October, Moonvember, like all the memes. We're going to see Bitcoin skyrocket. And we just didn't see that. So I think everybody's bearish right now. And I think that's when we're going to start to see some explosive growth in Bitcoin. Because, I think at the end of the day, everybody thinks, all right, come May, when the new Fed chair is in, they're going to lower interest rates. And when they lower interest rates, Bitcoin's going to skyrocket. I actually think the opposite. I think if the Fed chair doesn't cut on the first meeting for some reason, that's when we'll see Bitcoin actually start to shoot up or do something crazy, the opposite of what people think. So, I think what we're seeing in the precious metals market is just, just a taste of what we'll see in the Bitcoin markets here in the next few years, because of just how much people have been looking for a safety asset that is, like a hard asset like Bitcoin. But they're just all equating it to the physical assets like gold and silver right now. So I think Bitcoin's time will come. And, the power law people that were screaming that we aren't going to see the parabolic returns and it's just going to level off. I think, all of these models, they're right until they're not. And that's when, we'll start to see a short squeeze in the Bitcoin market. And that's when it'll really start to take off. And I would be shocked if we don't see that in the next 5 years, where we don't see some sort of a supply shock, because I think that there's like 2.5 million Bitcoin left on exchanges. And I just lined out to you earlier in this conversation, like 48 million wallets with $1 worth of Bitcoin. I mean, what happens if, we get 2.5 million people, or 25 million people, or 250 million people just realizing, oh, okay, well, I could just buy $1 worth of Bitcoin and start to take it off a wallet. I mean, what's going to happen then? I mean, I think at the end of the day, everybody's going to start to realize, hey, I want to get some of this digitally scarce asset, and there's nothing else like it on the planet. And once people start to figure that out, that's when shit's going to get crazy, to say the very least.
I've I'm not a expert when it comes to predicting the next move of Bitcoin whatsoever. But one thing I've learned in my over 6 years now in the Bitcoin market is when the masses, and I'm thinking about what your neighbor thinks, what most people in the YouTube comments or on Twitter are writing, when they all think it's very positive, it's usually right before a crash, and when they all think very negatively, it's usually when the Bitcoin bull run slowly starts again. And I've mentioned it in the beginning, and that's why I wanted to come to that question. I've never seen such a negative comment section. I've never seen such a negative sentiment. Everyone is like everything is going bust right now. And so I would not be surprised if there's some really face melting thing going on towards the end of the year. I don't know. I don't think it will come at any time soon. And I also, it's just like I could be very wrong here. I don't try to predict anything short term because it's just impossible to know. And Bitcoin always surprises us. But I have this feeling that we kind of need to get all the leverage guys, the people that are not so convinced of Bitcoin, out of the market and wash them out, to be able to really go hard in the next bull run with a new wave of people. I don't know exactly how it's happening. I've talked a lot to James Jack already on this channel. He's very smart on all those topics, and I love his insights. And I also had, as you mentioned it, Power Law people all already on a few. I think Stephen was the last one, and he mentioned that he kind of foresees the next bubble being like in 2027 only. But honestly, I think Bitcoin will do something very surprising, probably to the upside in 2026. But that's just a gut feeling of mine, and no evidence behind those words.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm the same way as you. I mean, if I love James Check. I mean, he does outstanding work. And I think the things that he's said to me, and I've heard him on other shows like yourselves as well, where is like we've had giant buyers, and Jordy Visser has described it as Bitcoin's IPO moment, where essentially we had a bunch of whales come in, and the sell off was absolutely crazy. Like, we've never seen a sell off from whales as big as we saw within this past bull run. And I think that's because 100K was probably some sort of mental barrier. Those who have been around for a while know that a long time ago, American Hodl had like a champagne bottle that he said that he was going to pop when Bitcoin hit 100K. I think like Bitcoin was at maybe like $1,000 or something, very tiny at that time. So, the OGs who have been around for a while were waiting for that 100K mark. And let's be honest. All right, sure. If you got 1,000 Bitcoin and you want to sell off 100 at 100K, go for it, man. Like, you earned it. You held through that volatility. And I was personally surprised when we saw so much of a sell off, a few months ago before we got down to 60K, that we didn't crash to 60K or lower because of how much these whales were selling off. And I thought it was like, okay, it was because of these big institutional buyers. But I mean, if you look at it now, I think a lot of the weak hands are starting to get shaken out a little bit, which is a little bit worrisome to the potential downside. But I think that that's when, the people will start to come back and buy with a vengeance. I mean, if you look at the numbers in January, all of the corporate buying basically was from MicroStrategy. I think it was like 94.5 or 95% of all corporate treasury buys in January of this year were all from MicroStrategy. And then if you look at the ETFs, during the dip, I think only like 6% of the ETFs have, we're selling off. But we've actually seen, consecutive weeks of outflows in the ETFs for the first time since basically the ETFs came out. Granted, who knows what those ETFs buyers are doing? Maybe they're realizing, okay, I want to have it in self custody. But personally, I don't think that that's what those ETF buyers are doing. So we've had a massive amounts of sell off, but yet we still went from like 60 to 70K very quickly. So that's where I think like, this run up that we're seeing right now is a little bit of a, let's say like a bull trap, where people are thinking, oh, it's going to keep going up. Like, I think maybe we'll hang out down in the 60 to 70K range for a little bit. But like I said, that doesn't make me bullish for the long term of the future. I mean, I'm trying to scoop up as much sats as possible right now, and I'm sure you're trying to do the same thing, Robin. Where, we're seeing all the positiveness, we're seeing more and more adoption, we're seeing governments start to talk about it. I mean, we had Scott Bessent and JD Vance say positive things about Bitcoin in back-to-back weeks when Bitcoin was crashing to 60K. Now, the vice president would not be saying positive things about Bitcoin unless they truly believe something, and maybe they knew something behind the curtain. And who knows? Like I said, the traditional financial people behind the scenes, they realize what we have here. The only one that might not realize it is like Goldman Sachs. I think Goldman Sachs sold off like 40% of their position or something crazy. But I think Larry Fink, I think, Jamie Dimon is starting to come around. I think these big guys really start to understand about Bitcoin. And who knows, maybe they're behind the scenes manipulating the markets. I wouldn't put it past them. But I think at the end of the day, these guys are going to, be trying to scoop up as much Bitcoin as possible. So I'm begging you, plebs, don't sell your Bitcoin to these TradFi guys, because they're coming for it and they're here. And this is a different time than any cycle that we've seen before. And as we love to say in the Bitcoin space, this time is different. So I think we just need to keep our foot on the gas and keep trying to scoop up as much Bitcoin and have that long-term time preference, because it's going up and to the right. All you got to do is zoom out.
I have an interesting meme for you, and I think this is summing up my thoughts around the current moment in the best possible way. I think there is a sort of inevitability towards Bitcoin. You have the money printing, the big print coming up. You have something that you just can't avoid, the debasement of all fiat currencies, no matter where you live, is coming, is already here, and is just accelerating from here. Then where is the money going? To the hardest asset in the world. And this is just a matter of time till this ball absolutely shoots out in the sky. Yes, we don't know if it happens 2026 or 2030 or 2036 or like whenever this huge thing is. But I truly believe, and I had Parker Lewis also 2 times already in the show, and we talked about that in depth, that there is a suddenly moment in Bitcoin. I don't know how much you believe in that, or what's your theory around that, but I truly believe there is a what the F moment of common people of like, oh, this like fiat currency is not working and Bitcoin is where it is, and people will wake up. And do you see the charts of gold when the Deutsche Mark is hyperinflating? Gold was going up and down, plus and minus 20% in a month. It was really, really volatile, especially in that hyperinflating currency time. And so, as you said also before, this is also the biggest critique I have on the power law is what happens in the hyperinflation situation. And I don't think there is a way around hyperinflation at this point. Maybe I'm wrong, but we've seen in history what happens with hard assets in a hyperinflation situation. And I think the same thing will happen to Bitcoin, where we see Bitcoin jump from 250 to 800K down to 400K up to 1.5 million down to 500K again. It will be. All I want to say is, know the value of your Bitcoin and enjoy the ride along the way.
Exactly. Yeah. Robin, I'm going to play a little game with you here. Because I was talking about silver here a little bit earlier. How much paper silver do you think is there right now compared to like the total ounces of like physical silver?
That's crazy. I've never looked it up. I would say at least 2 times, 3 times as much, maybe. I don't know.
Okay. So it's an estimated 74 paper ounces of silver to one to literally over 400 paper ounces of silver to one physical ounce. And we saw silver do a 40% swing when there's potentially over 400 paper ounces of silver compared to just one physical ounce of silver. Now, we don't have that much drastic paper Bitcoin out there. I mean, no matter what you believe, right? I mean, we had the full meme going on this past summer about paper Bitcoin summer with all of, the derivatives, all the different, Bitcoin treasury companies coming online. And we saw the silver market move 40% in one day. And it's a $4 trillion asset with literally 400 to 1 paper to physical ounces. I mean, I don't know, when you see things like that, I don't know how you can't get bullish and can't think that Bitcoin could go absolutely parabolic like you're outlining. I mean, there's definitely somewhere in the future where Bitcoin has a literally $100,000 day, where maybe Bitcoin's at $1 million and it moves 10% in one single day, and we get Bitcoin from 1 million to 1.1 million. And I don't think that there's out of the realm of possibilities that, we're sitting here at 60,000. One night we go to sleep, Robin, and they turn on the money printer and all these people realize, hey, it's late on a Sunday, TradFi's sleeping, and we're going to see Bitcoin absolutely rip people's faces off on a Sunday night. I mean, the Trump administration tweeted about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve and what all of these, like the other crypto tokens that would have been in this, crypto stockpile. They tweeted that on a Sunday night. And I think that was strategic at a certain point because they realized, okay, traditional finance is asleep. We're going to kind of send a message to all this. So I think, just because TradFi has been here and everybody thought, oh, okay, TradFi's here, they're going to pump our bags. I think at the end of the day, these governments are smart. We're going to have governments that are going to be buying Bitcoin, and they're going to be doing it at strategic times when everybody is asleep and everybody's lolling away because they have basically access to that money printer. So I think at the end of the day, what we just lined out here, there's a very little people who have Bitcoin in cold storage. Once those people start to figure it out, there's a market that is way more developed than Bitcoin that literally got manipulated by JP Morgan traders that got thrown in jail that have 400 paper ounces to one physical ounce. We saw that market move 40% in a single day. I don't know, when you see those things, how you can't believe that Bitcoin is going to have diminishing returns and we're just not going to go parabolic at some point in time. I mean, of course, Parker Lewis, gradually then suddenly. I mean, how do you not believe that, right? And I think, as this Bitcoin market gets more developed, people are going to get lulled to sleep by it. Like, it's going to bore people. That's why we've seen so many people look at, different crypto tokens and other things like that, try to play these, fiat games. And, a lot of them probably got burned during this, bull or bear market when we saw this giant crash. And I think, at the end of the day, when people start to get lulled to sleep in Bitcoin, it's exactly like you said. That's when, we're going to start to see Bitcoin rip people's faces off. And that's when the fun begins, Robin, is when, it's going up and then the memes on Bitcoin Twitter are just everybody, pumping it up. And, that's when I think everybody's going to get excited. But I think right now, people are falling asleep. And when it's all quiet on the Western front, that's when I I get my guard up like, all right, something's about to happen here. I don't know what just yet, but I think that there's something brewing underneath the surface that's going to send Bitcoin to go parabolic.
The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. What do you say to all the people that are understanding Bitcoin and they know it's so valuable, but then they see it crashing down while gold is ripping, and then they come to the conclusion of Bitcoin must be manipulated. There is the BlackRocks now, and they control it. I even get comments of saying Bitcoin will no longer have those crazy price swings because the institutions are now in control of it. What do you say to those people?
Well, I mean, look, like I said with silver, JP Morgan is essentially the biggest physical silver holder on the planet. And there was an alleged, short squeeze between JP Morgan and China. China was trying to buy a bunch of physical silver because it was an industrial metal. And we saw the supply shock and that short squeeze kind of go up because of that. And allegedly, JP Morgan caused it on the upside because they were shorting it, playing long, all these different things, right? So, I think the unique thing with Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is that truly fixed scarce asset, and it is still a little bit distributed now. I mean, Seyr and Strategy has like 3% of the supply, and everybody's like, this is going to be the richest country on earth, our company on earth. And they have just 3% of the total Bitcoin supply. So, I mean, I don't find it out of the question that, some of these countries, some of these big players like BlackRock, they're going to be scooping up as much Bitcoin as possible. But at the end of the day, the unique thing about Bitcoin is that, we can try to get as much Bitcoin as we possibly can for our dollars right now. But no matter what, we're going to have the same voting rights as BlackRock when it comes to it. All you got to do is run a node, hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you essentially have is the same amount of power as BlackRock. So sure, maybe the price can be manipulated in the short term, but it's a truly fixed, decentralized asset. I mean, it's like the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing. Like, we have Jeffrey Epstein allegedly, the news that he allegedly created Bitcoin crashing the price, where previously, when Bitcoin's price was crashing, it had nothing to do with Bitcoin. It was all strictly just macro related stuff. And Bitcoin was so connected to the Teslas and the tech stocks and everything else that now I actually think it's really bullish that we see Bitcoin move on Bitcoin news, where we're not seeing Bitcoin move on news that's really outside of, the Bitcoin space. So, if we get news on the gold market shorting or being a supply shock, or news of the silver market being on a supply shock, that's when we see the silver markets move like crazy. Well, now we're starting to see the same thing in the Bitcoin markets. And, as us who have been in the Bitcoin space for a while, it's just par for the course. We're just battling FUD every single cycle, it seems. And this new FUD is that, a guy who sent untranscripted emails across on his island and just essentially, did everything out in public, but was just a really good at blackmailing people, was essentially this guy that created the most complex cryptographic network that we've ever seen on planet Earth, and made it truly decentralized so nobody can control it. Yeah, I mean, it's just like an outrageous argument, but for the average person, I mean, I don't know about you, Robin, but I was getting texts from my normie friends like, "Hey, bro, like, you've been behind this Bitcoin thing for a while. Now Epstein has created it. Like, what? How does that look?" And I'm just like, dude, like, you really believe all of this after all the evidence that's lined out that Jeffrey Epstein was this smart of a guy that he was able to essentially, create something like this? I mean, I think, at the end of the day, he created something that JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon have zero control over and have been able to, haven't been able to control at all. And, you know, essentially he was as close to the money printer as you could possibly be. I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I think, seeing all of these movements and all of this negative FUD for the Bitcoin space, I mean, it's just, at the end of the day, just zoom out. Look at the true principles that we've been lining out through all of this. There's 21 million Bitcoin. It's a fixed supply. BlackRock, Jamie Dimon, U.S. governments, you name it. Everybody is trying to buy as much Bitcoin as possible. And you think for some reason, as you're a pleb sitting here, that you're, all the way smarter than all of these guys that, found out that, this other shitcoin token over here is going to explode and go parabolic. And this is going to be the future when, I don't know, XRP or one of these other crap tokens that we keep getting thrown at all the time is going to revolutionize something, when in reality, it's just Bitcoin. It's always been Bitcoin, Bitcoin only. And we're going to win eventually, Robin. It's just at the end of the day, we got a little short-term price fluctuations that, may turn people bearish. I mean, just zoom out. It's the best performing asset of the last 16, 17 years. I mean, we're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think this zooming out is this hard thing to do. Like we are in this like Bitcoin gold rush over 20, 30 years, and it's very obvious when you look in 20. What is 30 years, 2038, back to like the last 30 years. And you're like, oh yeah, like it's obvious, like a gold rush. It's like really, really this steep curve. But then when you look into and zoom into 2026 in that one specific year where it's like 12 months of pain, it's really hard to be a Bitcoiner. But I guess it's always hard to zoom out. We always make problems a lot bigger that are happening right now. I mean, it's even completely unrelated to Bitcoin. Think about the problems that you have right now, and they seem so big. Think about the problems that you had 5 years ago, and you're like, why did I even get annoyed by those problems? Did I even pay attention to those problems? They are not even problems. They seem so distant. They were just like small like challenges along the way that I was happy to interact with. And so I think the same way is with the Bitcoin price. It's hard to be in the moment, but long term it makes a lot more sense. And it's like, you have to get to this Bitcoin Zen. I always talk to people, be at least 2 cycles or at least 8 years into Bitcoin, and if you're still down after 8 years, then you have a right to complain.
Yeah, I mean, I think just humans by nature are emotional creatures, right? We look for those short-term dopamine hits. Everything is now getting shorter and shorter term. Everybody's saying, our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. I don't truly believe that that's the 100% the case, but that's a different argument. What I do think is that, everybody says, and it's traditional investing too, when you see your dollar amount of whatever you buy, S&P 500, your real estate, everything like that, you get super emotional and you want to sell it right away. So I think that's the beauty of Bitcoin, is that Bitcoin's a 24/7, 365 liquid market. The reason why so many millionaires, I think like 90% of all millionaires own real estate right now. The reason that is because real estate by nature is hard to sell. If you wanted to go sell your house, it's going to take you probably a couple months. I mean, it was maybe during the COVID times you could do it within, 1 month, but right now it's probably going to take you 30, 60, 90 days to sell a house. And so, because of that, because you need to sit and wait for a while, people back out of selling their homes all the time. And so, okay, well, if you had that same time preference with Bitcoin, where, all right, if I wanted to sell, but I needed to wait 3 months in order to do that, we'd have a lot more people that wouldn't sell at these immediate dips. But that is the beauty of Bitcoin. It really tests your conviction with all of this. So I think that's why you really need to sit back and like learn as much as possible about Bitcoin, right? The 40 hours per week of the Bitcoin podcast, as they say, to really truly understand, what the asset you're holding. And I think, the more people that start to figure out about Bitcoin, about that it's this fixed supply asset that I've been yelling at the top of my lungs for the past hour or so about, that if you just have a million sats, 0.01 Bitcoin, that will put you in such a different class that you wouldn't even be able to fathom it if you had that much physical dollars. So I think we have just so much pain going on in the traditional fiat system that I think more people are going to start to wake up to it. It's just a matter of time. I mean, the average age of the first time home buyer last year in 2025 was 40 years old, Robin. Can you believe that? You had to wait until you were 40 to buy a house just globally. I mean, that's insane. By that time you should be, having a wife and a couple kids and maybe being able to settle down in an area with the white picket fence. But now, because of the fiat system, people our age are feeling a lot more pain. And so instead of wishing that they could buy a house, they're looking at stuff like Bitcoin. Should I just be putting my money here because this is a little bit easier? I could buy, $10 worth of Bitcoin, $100 worth of Bitcoin every single week instead of needing, $40,000, $50,000 in order to buy a house for the first time. And sure, maybe it fluctuates, it goes up and down, right? But I think at the end of the day, more people are going to be starting to wake up to the fact that, hey, Bitcoin is this true scarce asset. I could access it for a little amount of money every single week. Sure, maybe the dollar value on it goes down week to week or up week to week. I just can't get emotional about it. And I got to just keep stacking. I think more people are going to wake up to that. And it's just a matter of time. We're still so early.
It's It's fascinating. Yeah, I love that. You bring it in a nice frame. I want to get a few more things in here. We've talked about it a little bit about the treasury companies. What is kind of your sense or overview of all the treasury companies and the talks associated with that? I will just let you make an overview of how you think about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the treasury companies are interesting. And I think, Danny Knowles had a good conversation with Michael Saylor not too long ago on what Bitcoin did. The clip kind of went viral where Saylor was getting a little upset, because I think the way that Bitcoiners have been looking at these Bitcoin treasury companies is, okay, I'm going to buy this treasury company that's got a 10 MNAV or something crazy because I truly believe that, XYZ founder is going to be able to get closer to the money printer and get as much Bitcoin as possible. And the reality is that, look, Saylor has, over 700,000 Bitcoin on his balance sheet right now. And if you look at Strategy's MNAV, it's just about one. I think, kind of similarly to James Check, where a lot of these treasury companies, they're going to go to a valuation just about of one, of the MNAV of one, of what they have on their Bitcoin on their balance sheet. But that doesn't change the fact that I think that these treasury companies, what they're doing is extremely smart. I mean, let's just face it. Would you rather have a company that makes tables or coffee mugs or whatever it is holding just physical cash, or would you rather have them holding Bitcoin? I'd rather have a company that's holding Bitcoin. So I think at the end of the day, each company is going to have a different valuation, a different, whether or not it's a good investment or not is really up to you, the person. I just think the best physical asset that you can hold, or the best asset that you could hold in general, is just physical Bitcoin in self custody. And if you want to play around with a little bit of these treasury companies, sure, go nuts. Support, these Bitcoin companies or these Bitcoiners that are building businesses and holding Bitcoin on the balance sheet. But I do think that, if you don't have as much Bitcoin and you haven't reached your goal of how much you want to stack, you really need to just keep stacking Bitcoin and really not try to get away from that ultimate goal of getting to X amount of Bitcoin, whatever you want to get to. And I think these treasury companies are just, it's in the first inning, right? I mean, they're going to see a lot of volatility. They all bought the top basically. But the unique thing about these treasury companies is that they bought basically one time last year and then they didn't buy again. So, they saw whatever type of raise it was, whether it was like a pipe investment or something like that, where they were able to buy, 1,000, 5,000 Bitcoin, and then they just kind of quit buying from there, and they had to ride the volatility of being a Bitcoin treasury company. I think a lot of these are going to learn, and I think if you buy Bitcoin and it's a bad business, it's not going to help anything over the long run, right? I mean, if it's a bad business, it's not making any money, it's going to be tough. So I think Bitcoin treasury companies are going to revolutionize how business is actually being made and being done. And I think we're just in the early innings of it. And I think it's good for the long term. It's going to change how businesses are operated and how every transaction is thought about and made. And I think it's going to make for better and stronger businesses. But do I think all of them are going to make it? And do I think all of them are going to be, better investments than Bitcoin? No, I don't. And I don't think that we're going to have very many companies that are going to be shooting above an MNAV of 1. I think eventually we'll all come to around that. And the early innings that we're in right now of finding companies that have a premium on Bitcoin, maybe you'll be able to find some now, but I think in the long term, it's all just going to go back to, Bitcoin being the true and best asset. But that doesn't mean in the short term that you can't find something that is, maybe a diamond in the rough. Obviously not financial advice. I don't know enough about all of these different ones where I could point to this one exactly and say, okay, that's going to be the one I'm going to be putting, my name behind. I just really think that at the end of the day, we should be encouraging these companies to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet because, we're all on the same team. And, I'd rather have a company that's, putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet than not. And I think as long as they're able to, survive and able to create a strong business, I think it's a positive. It's just, I think Bitcoiners were just investing in these companies that were like 10 to 12 MNAV, and then it crashed down to 1, and they were upset at the business owner when in reality, it was just an overvalued company. And that's just kind of how markets work, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's you have to know what you're getting into if you're buying a company, a security, and people confuse buying Bitcoin with a treasury company, which is a whole different level, a whole different game, which can work out, but it also can't. And it's something very different. You mentioned, I think, earlier that you're thinking, like I don't know if you just said it like that or you actually meant it, that Michael Saylor has a shot at being the richest person alive. Do you think that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind that he will be eventually. The only person that I think that could potentially, come to bat to him is Mark Zuckerberg at Meta. And the only reason I'm saying that is because he has similar voting rights to what Saylor had when he first started buying Bitcoin at Strategy. Of course, Saylor's had to sell off some of his ownership and some of his buying shares, but Meta is the only company that has a bigger market cap than MSTR right now. And, Mark Zuckerberg has that ability to go and buy a bunch of Bitcoin. Now, if that were to happen, I think that would send Bitcoin, I always joke, it goes skyrocketing in flight, where we have that afternoon delight and we see Bitcoin just absolutely go parabolic. If he were to announce that, I think that would be just absolutely insane. And that would be the first Mag 7 company that I would think that would, put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Now, if that were to happen, I think Bitcoin's price would go so parabolic that he wouldn't be able to get the 700,000 Bitcoin that, Seyr has. But, I mean, he has a stronger company than Seyr right now. He has, a little closer access to that money printer. And he has been going for this little transition where, he's got the chain popping, the hair going, the, surfboard with the American flag type of stuff. So he's the only person that I think that could potentially really, compete with Seyr as being the richest man on the planet. But will he do that? Does he see there? I don't know. I mean, he's got two goats allegedly named Bitcoin and Maxi. So we all know he is like maybe a closet Bitcoiner, but who knows, man? I also think the rivalry that he's got with the Winklevoss twins is a little interesting wrinkle there that maybe he didn't buy Bitcoin right away because the Winklevoss twins got into it, but maybe he wants to become the richest Bitcoin billionaire just to shove it in their face too. Who knows how prideful these rich guys can really be? But I think, like, if anything, Zuckerberg is the only guy that I could see, overtaking Seyr. But right now, I mean, I think he's got a pretty big lead, and it would be very hard for anybody else to really do it. I mean, look at what Jack Mallers trying to do, right? Jack Mallers and Tether. They've got literally the most profitable business model on the planet. And, they've got maybe 50,000 Bitcoin just under on their balance sheet. I mean, they're leaps and bounds behind, Seyr at Strategy. Sure, maybe 21 will be able to get to that million Bitcoin mark like they're projecting and their goal is. But I mean, if I had to bet who would be getting to that million Bitcoin mark faster, Seyr or, 21, I mean, it's really hard to go against the company that has over 700,000 Bitcoin on the balance sheet right now. So, I think it's all lining out for Michael Seyr just to be the richest man on the planet, because he's essentially using the old fiat system just so brilliantly to get into the new system in Bitcoin. And he's using everything under the sun to essentially obtain more Bitcoin. And even during this bear market, I mean, Stretch and all of these, fixed income products that he's rolling out, they're doing so well, and they're still maintaining and working exactly how they want to work. So, I think it was interesting that he raised a little bit of cash and put that on the balance sheet to pay out the dividends just in case. But I mean, he talked about it, just recently, that even if Bitcoin fell to like $8,000, he would still be perfectly fine and able to just refinance the debt. So I think, he's truly found a way to basically almost get to a point where he's got so much Bitcoin that it would be nearly impossible for him to fail. Well, I think that eventually he'll be the richest man on the planet, and it's just a matter of time. It's just how long your time preference is, Robin. Just how long your time preference is.
21 Capital, I just I want to add, I really want to see them do something. They've been speaking a lot, but I haven't seen anything of the execution yet. So I think I trust in the execution of Jack Mallers, and I think they have great contacts also with Cantor Fitzgerald, and like all the things that are going on behind. But I just haven't seen anything from them. So it's I haven't seen any execution, and now they're shouting out that we want to get to 1 million Bitcoin. I'm like, I don't know. It's I have to see some action before I believe you guys.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, right? I mean, it's that I just looked it up. They've got like 43,514 Bitcoin at the time of this recording. So, they're still a long ways away from that million coins. Now, Jack's a young guy. I think, he'll be able to potentially see it out of them basically getting to that million Bitcoin if we don't get crazy parabolic numbers, in the short term. But I mean, I think it's going to be definitely an uphill battle. I think it's ambitious, and it's something to shoot for. I mean, I want to get to 1 million Bitcoin myself personally as well, Robin. But I mean, am I going to get there? I don't know, but, I think it's better to shoot for something that, almost seems unobtainable than to just say, oh, we want to get to, we want to get to 50,000 Bitcoin and just kind of screw off and not really go for it. So, I think, like I said, in January, we basically had just Michael Saylor buying Bitcoin and nobody else really did. So, I mean, these treasury companies, if you really want to be a Bitcoin treasury company and that's your play, you need to have a profitable business or the ability to raise a bunch of money. Something that Jack has said that I think is really interesting is that essentially their plan was to get a little bit of Bitcoin, but then use that Bitcoin to refinance and buy some businesses, some profitable businesses that they see. So I think that, if I had to make a prediction for 21, I think that's going to be their next move is they're going to buy some sort of business that can have that steady cash flow that essentially they could just put that on autopilot and use that steady cash flow to buy Bitcoin. And maybe, who knows, maybe use AI to, trim the fat of that business. I don't really know what they're going to do fully in there, but I do think that they're going to be looking for more of businesses in order to buy. And maybe that's going to be their next move, not the Bitcoin purchases. Because I think, as like with Bitcoin miners, I think the Bitcoin miners that just plug into the wall and mine Bitcoin, I think that's going to, end eventually, as I think these Bitcoin treasury companies that are simply just, me and you, Robin, forming a company and then raising debt and buying Bitcoin, I think, and having no business behind it, I think that those companies are going to end here as well. And it's really the companies that have a profitable business model that are able to, just keep getting that revenue coming in. And that revenue, as long as that can finance the debt, they'll be able to buy more Bitcoin and use those debts and the fiat games in order to buy more Bitcoin in the long term. I think that's going to be the eventual play. And we just kind of had the bumps in the road this past year of all these companies essentially raising a bunch of money to buy Bitcoin and then just kind of, well, as we see it, sitting put on their hands. But in reality, I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, of them researching, talking to other companies, potentially looking to buy other businesses. And Bitcoin and Bitcoiners, because it's 24/7, 365, we like to see things moving very fast. But the reality is TradFi, governments, all of these things, they all move so slow. And we just have the exchange of information so quick with social media now that, we have more of a microscope on these things. So I think, there's a lot probably going on, and I predict that something probably big is going to happen out of 21 this year. I don't really know what it is. I haven't talked to Jack or anything like that. But I do think that something's big is probably coming from them. We just don't know what yet.
That's interesting. For the one thing that you said with the richest man, when you said like you see two contenders, I thought you're gonna say Elon Musk. Why didn't you mention him?
Yeah, I think Elon is just very, I guess, let's say sporadic. I mean, he's had the opportunity. Tesla has had Bitcoin on the balance sheet. But Elon, he wants to build and hyper focus on like one thing at a time. So I think Elon, if he wanted to be the richest man, I mean, he already is right now. But if he wanted to be the richest man on the planet, he could just continue to stack Bitcoin. I mean, he's got SpaceX, he's got Tesla. He could have been doing all of these things already, and he hasn't. And I think with Tesla, we saw the EVs. I think he's just done very good marketing. I mean, if you really look at self-driving cars, if you were to go ask the average person, who do you think the leader is in self-driving cars, they'd probably say Tesla. But in reality, it's Google, and because they've been having this for so long. And if you go to downtown Austin, where I am right now, you walk around the streets, you'll see Waymos all the time, but you won't see any Teslas really self-driving and picking people up. And I think that's just because people don't have the exposure to it and they don't really realize it. And Elon's done a great job with marketing. And I think he's, one of the best entrepreneurs and, inventors of our lifetime. I just think from everything that I've seen with Elon is that, he's understood and kind of, thought about Bitcoin for a while. I've actually heard David Marcus, I believe he was from PayPal. Maybe I'm misremembering his name, but I think I heard on like an interview here recently that it was Elon's original job to create something like a Bitcoin at PayPal. And Elon just wasn't smart enough or wasn't able to figure it out at that time. So, I think he's intuitively known what something like Bitcoin has, that something like Bitcoin has been needed globally for a very long time, back to the PayPal mafia days. But I just think that the way that his companies are set up, and all of the different aspects of his lives, the multiple wives, the multiple baby mamas that he's got, like I think he's got a lot of outside factors that could affect his wealth, that are kind of out of his control. So I think it really is a two-person race, I think, between Seyr and Zuckerberg right now. And, there's probably, at the end of the day, there's probably some sort of avenue where I don't think, Zuckerberg is going to get there. I think it is like a less than a 50% shot. So less likely than not that Zuckerberg would actually overtake Seyr. I just think that there is a chance, and sure, like maybe it's not a non-zero chance that Elon would get into Bitcoin. I mean, he's already the richest man on the planet. So there is that non-zero chance where he could eventually, buy a bunch of Bitcoin and maintain that position as the richest man on the planet. I just think that he's a little bit more sporadic and he gets hyper focused on one thing. And I don't necessarily think he'll get there to a point where he's going to be just buying a bunch of Bitcoin. And that's kind of what he's going to be going all in on. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll be setting up Bitcoin miners on asteroids or something crazy, eventually. But I just kind of see it as the fiat games that we're seeing these companies play. He just doesn't have as much ownership as a Zuckerberg at Meta and all these other things. So it's just, if you were to use the fiat system in order to obtain as much Bitcoin as possible, he just doesn't have as much access to the money printer. But, maybe he's then refinancing homes or doing other things like that in order to get to that place. Who knows? But yeah, I think it is a little bit of an interesting thought experiment to think, okay, who could be the richest person on planet Earth? And who knows, it could be somebody that we've never heard about too. Because, I mean, if you look at the S&P 500, like 25, 30 years ago, like the companies at the top, we really don't recognize. So 25, 30 years down the line, who knows? Elon could have gone for something crazy, gone broke. Zuckerberg could have kind of done the same thing. And it could be Seyr at the top. I'm not sure. But I do think Bitcoin kind of changes the game a little bit for everybody now.
I have a lot of thoughts on that. I just want to throw in another name because you mentioned him in the podcast. What are your thoughts on Mr. Beast as a contender for that position at some point?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, like I think, I mean, this is just another rant that I love, but I mean, I'm a big believer in YouTube, man. So I think that Mr. Beast's platform is the most powerful platform that we have on planet Earth right now. And I mean, if you just look at the numbers, like YouTube is going on to every single smart TV. YouTube is everywhere, and he's mastered that algorithm so much so that Amazon is buying him out to put the Beast games on their platform. And so as a marketing agent, he's created whatever, the Feastables, all of these different spin-off products, which are just essentially low hanging fruits in my opinion, but essentially just all of these different brands where he's able to create tiny food, soda, candy, all these different things. I think it's just a matter of time before he realizes something about Bitcoin. And then, instead of, I'm going to give away $1 million on some sort of show, he's going to be giving away one Bitcoin. I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibilities. And if I had to project, I bet that comes in the next, 2 to 5 years, where he's doing something like this. I just think he's another one of, he's another one of us where he's just kind of, got a little bit of the tism there. He's a little autistic when it comes to something, and he just is hyper focused on YouTube, now he's hyper focused on, kind of doing the retail sales, and listening to recent interviews from him about how he's just looking at the boxes and, the placement of, different products and things like that, and how it works in Walmarts and all these different things. I think eventually he'll hyper focus on something like Bitcoin or how money works. And that's when he'll go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And once he goes down that, I think, as we all have done, as the fellow autist in the crowd here have all done, once you go down that rabbit hole, you can't unsee it. And he's, like I said, got the biggest platform on the planet. And once he can't, unsee that, and he starts to mix in Bitcoin to some of those videos, I think that's when it's all bets are off. I mean, we could do as much as we can and start to put Bitcoin, on there, but on YouTube and other things, but we just can't compete with, Mr. Beast, who's been, doing this for so long, and essentially, wrapping up and putting all these things there on a while. But, something that's interesting too is not only like Mr. Beast. I think, like, we're seeing a lot of traditional financial influencers start to come into the scene as well, which I think are very influential. Sure, we don't have the Dave Ramseys, who I think, I have separate opinions about him, but we've seen Grant Cardone, we've seen Robert Kiyosaki. I actually know somebody who works with Robert Kiyosaki and kind of helps on the back end of his YouTube. And he tells me that Robert Kiyosaki sits and he wakes up every day, and part of his daily routine is watching Bitcoin influencers make Bitcoin videos. So who knows, Robin? Maybe Robert Kiyosaki is going to be watching this podcast or something like that, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about. But I think, even just looking around from traditional influencers, they're all plugged in. They're all watching content. So I think the power of content, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all these things, is that you really never know who's watching. Like, to us, it's just kind of like a number on a screen at the end of the day, but you never know when these big people kind of are watching, your podcast or a video or a live stream or whatever it is. And that person could be very influential on the next person or millions of people, who knows, down the line to get into Bitcoin. And that's when things kind of start to really take off. So I think, to answer your original question, I think Mr. Beast coming in would be absolutely colossal. But I also think that, you're doing Satoshi's work over here, Robin, with your podcast. And I think, there's probably been some very big influential people that have heard your podcast that you have no idea who have heard it, and they probably wouldn't come out and say anything here eventually. But maybe a few years down the line, we'll hear that you orange pilled some crazy influential person, and all they did was just listen to a few of your podcasts. So you never know who's listening, and I think I could just encourage people to start making some content and keep orange pilling people. Don't get too discouraged, because I think we've all kind of been there where we tried to tell people at 60K last time to buy Bitcoin, and then they bought it when it crossed 100,000, and then now it's at 60K again, and they're like yelling at us like, dude, what the hell? Or like, we told you to buy like years ago, sort of thing. So I think Mr. Beast and all of these people, they're eventually going to come in, and once they're in, it's maybe that's the suddenly moment that we see things start to really take off.
Yeah, I brought up Mr. Beast because he's so young. He's 27 years old. He's, I think, half a year or so older than me. And he is, 14, 15 years younger than Zuckerberg. He's, I don't even know, Seyr, I think, is 61. So Seyr is like more than twice Mr. Beast's age. And honestly, the company setup of Mr. Beast is kind of a new version of Disney for me. He creates his own kind of industry. And what I found interesting the last week is that he bought Step. Like, the Beast industry bought Step, which is not a bank, it's a financial service company. And he wants to get into financial education and wants to get into talking about that whole thing. He potentially like if he gets Bitcoin fast enough, he has a shot because he has a very long life still ahead of his, which it's just like a very unfair advantage that he has, for example, over Saylor, just because like Saylor is like more than twice his age, and with his very very young age, he has a huge freaking company and the biggest marketing channel that anyone can ever hope for. And he has not even taken anything public yet. Like there's no public company of him, and he could take Beast Industries public and raise a bunch of money. And so like I find just like interesting. He's like a very young guy. Nobody takes him serious in TradFi because he's this YouTuber thing. So he has kind of this underdog thing, and like the new generation is kind of behind him. I don't know. Like I just like find him as an interesting contender for him being the richest guy alive in like 20, 25 years. Not in the next 10 years, but like 2 decades, 3 decades out down the line.
Yeah, I mean, you have a long enough time preference. Like, God bless Sailor, but if he's alive in like 30 years, he'd be beating the average age, right, of people. And who knows? Maybe Sailor, when he's like 90 years old or something like that, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to be playing all these fiat games. Maybe he finally gets tired and doesn't want to work anymore. Who knows, right? And that would definitely leave the door open for somebody like Mr. Beast. And like, I mean, I was saying, I mean, I could go on an hour long rant if you want me to on how bullish I am on YouTube as a platform. But I think just having that overall, just full, like just market share and his ability too. I mean, he's essentially mastered the biggest platform on planet Earth. And, we have all these different streaming services. More people are getting in and using TV for YouTube, or using YouTube on TVs instead of using a million different streaming platforms that we have. I think all just signs are just pointing to YouTube as a social media and the long form content as just being, the way that we're going to be able to educate and get people on board. I mean, let's just face it. A lot of us here probably listening learned about Bitcoin through podcasts and other conversations. You didn't learn about Bitcoin through, a TikTok dance or something like that, So, I mean, I do think that there's maybe room to bring people over on like shorts over to the long form stuff. But I think to truly educate and learn about the financial system, which nobody has been taught about, you need to be able to master these long form content. And Mr. Beast, there's nobody better that has mastered long form content to be able to keep people's attention for a long enough period of time. And so if he could bring those powers over and educate people about traditional financial topics and about Bitcoin, well, I mean, we'll all be taking notes from him on how to do that. So I think I mean, you have a long enough time preference out. I think somebody like Mr. Beast could definitely take the throne. And but I just think, for my argument about Zuckerberg and Saylor, that's like next 10 to 20 years, I would say. Where Mr. Beast, you have a little bit longer of a time preference out, and he'll be able to take the cake. I think, when Mr. Beast is Saylor's age, who knows? He'll probably be maybe he'll be earlier, but he might be the first trillionaire, because I'm pretty sure, like, if you add up all of his companies right now, he's like a billionaire already at like 26, 27. So, I wouldn't doubt it that, if Bitcoin hasn't fully taken over in the next 30 years, that, Mr. Beast would be potentially the first trillionaire. Maybe we'll get that even sooner at this point, the way that the money printer is just going to go burr. But, I wouldn't be surprised to see Mr. Beast become the youngest trillionaire ever as a headline here in like maybe 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, I think he could be the youngest one, but the first one I think is Elon Musk. Like he's so close to it now. He's almost at like when you Google it, he's like at 850 billion. Like that's and with the money printer, that's like next Tuesday. Like, so this will be. I think I am already looking forward to the headlines. Oh, trillionaire! It's so unfair. Like, shut up.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we were saying at the beginning, like $1 million used to be a big deal before, like, when we were, kids. Now, a billionaire used to be a big deal, and now we're like talking about like trillionaire. So, I mean, I think the difference between a billion and a trillion is like colossal, and we can't even fathom that. But I mean, these numbers, like the amount of zeros just start to mean less and less and less. Like I've been traveling a bunch here lately, and when you go to Colombia or you go to Peru, they're talking like, oh, that's 17,000 soles, or that's 100,000 Colombian pesos, and they're, it's like what, it's like $25 or $20 or whatever it is. And so, like, all right, 100,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money when you put it in, like, all right, it's like 25 USD, like the purchasing power. But when you really think about that number, like 100,000 of something should be worth a lot, but in reality, it's not. So, I think the bigger, to your point, when the money printer goes burr, the number of zeros just, mean less and less, and these numbers mean less and less. I mean, if we were to go back, 100 years and tell people, oh, the average salary in the U.S. is like $60,000, and the average house is worth $500,000, they would tell you that you're absolutely insane, because they were buying meals for a dollar or 25 cents or whatever it was. So, I think when you just see and zoom out and see the amount of inflation going on, it's just something that, I still think like our human brains just can't even fathom just how much inflation has just inflated away the dollar. And it just happens, like we think it happens slowly over time. But when you really just like put it into perspective, that the dollar's lost like 99% of its overall purchasing power, it's just insane, man. But eventually people are going to wake up, Rob, and I have faith that they're going to wake up.
I want to just bring that up because people don't realize the scale of it. What's the difference between 1 million, 1 billion, and 1 trillion? If you take 1 million seconds, you are at 12 days. Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, not that much. 1 billion seconds, so that's like one step up, is not like 30 days or like a year or so. It's 31 years. It's like a huge step from 1 million to 1 billion. And then another step from 1 billion. So like Seyr is now worth like 5 billion or 10 billion, and Elon Musk is soon worth already a trillion. That's the step from like 31 years to 300 centuries. That's like 32,000 years. That is such a colossal difference in distance or like in time. I think people like in our human brain cannot comprehend that there's like a huge step between billion and trillion, because it's just like right after each other. But like there's 1,000 billion in 1 trillion, and people like it sounds not big enough, but it's huge.
Yeah, it's like insane. Like I'm 31 here right now, as we're coming to this, and my birthday's in July, so I've almost been alive for a billion seconds here, which is kind of crazy, to put that into perspective. So I mean, hey, if I had a dollar for every second I'd be alive, I would almost be a billionaire here, Robin. So it's absolutely insane when you put it into perspective for that. And I think when you look at the amount of debt too that the United States in, it's like we're at $38.5 trillion. And, I don't know if you've seen the US debt clock, but when you see there and you see the numbers just ticking up, like if I stare at that for too long, like I almost get motion sickness from watching how much debt is actually like going up like crazy, because it's just, I mean, it's phenomenal. Like how much we just increasingly print more money, and we're just debasing our currency while we're sleeping. And it's, at a certain point, it's like we don't have an income problem. Every single year since the year 2000, I believe the U.S. government has brought in more tax revenue, but the debt has increased so much more at the end of the day. And I think it's just the short term thinking of the 4-year cycles, the 4-year presidencies, that the United States government doesn't have an obtaining of money problem. They just have a serious spending problem. And I think, that spending, it's a drug. I mean, we see it at the end of the day, and the US government's addicted. We're not going to see them stop spending money anytime soon. And I was trying to look this up too. I don't know if there's some like crazy stat. I think it's like if the U.S. like paid down like 100 million or $1 million of their debt every single year since the year Jesus Christ was, around. we still wouldn't be able to pay off our entire debt. So it's some like crazy numbers that we just see. And when you really put it into perspective, from all these different facts, just like the amount of debt that the US government has and the amount of debt or money in circulation, like these numbers just shouldn't make any sense. But, it's just commonplace now. And essentially, we've just gotten to the point where we accept it.
Yeah, that's 100% true, and it just like doesn't sound right. Like the numbers just don't make sense anymore. One more topic that I want to really get into with you, because it's as a person that really thinks about Bitcoin 24/7, as I do, and I think also you do. We think not only about like why Bitcoin is so great, but also what are we actually doing with our Bitcoin? How are we securing it? Should we have an emergency fund in our fiat local currency? Should we borrow against it? Like, there are so many questions on the personal finance side of Bitcoin. What are your, like, from your years of experience being in Bitcoin, from all of the hours of conversations with Bitcoiners, what have been your like biggest learnings on the personal finance side of Bitcoin, like with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so. I mean, let's face it, right now, it is very difficult to live 100% on a Bitcoin standard, especially when everything is priced in dollars. So, I think what Seyr is doing right now, from like a business perspective, is very telling, right? I mean, he got, I think it's like 3 to 5 years or something like that worth of, dividend payments in cash, just sitting on their balance sheet, just waiting because of the way that Bitcoin price fluctuates. So I think the worst position you could be in Bitcoin is being a forced seller. So you want to avoid that at all costs. So, obviously everybody's personal finances, it is personal, right? But you want to have enough of a emergency fund, stuff like that, in order to weather some sort of these storms, right? I mean, like we were talking about earlier, if we were to have this conversation back in October, I would be shocked, to be quite honest with you, that would be sitting at this Bitcoin price that we're at right now. So, you want to prepare for the worst, and hope for the best. So, I would say, you need to have at least 3 to 6 months of personal, find our personal, just, as emergency funds to help weather some of these storms. And you always want to kind of have some money coming in, especially when you're a little bit younger. You want to have enough money coming in where you can allocate some to Bitcoin and pay off some of those, expenses, whether it's a mortgage, rent, food, all of those things. And then, you could just put a little bit worth of your paycheck into Bitcoin. And I think that's the beauty of Bitcoin that a lot of people, don't really grasp as well, is like, you need to, like, a lot of people think you need to be buying like a full Bitcoin or something like that. I know people that DCA, or like, are bartenders. They DCA with, one or 10 or $100 a week, or something really minuscule. And they just put that into cold storage every single week. And then that's their savings. And then they put a little bit, maybe they save $200 a paycheck. They put $100 worth of that into Bitcoin, 100 towards an emergency fund or whatever it is. That's just a simple math example, but I think, doing that. And then I also think, like, if you ever wanted to borrow against your Bitcoin, um, you know, it's hard to say now in hindsight, but uh, I think the good times to borrow against your Bitcoin are in a bear market, because, all right, if the Bitcoin was going lower, right? How much lower are we going to go than 60,000? I don't really know. A lot of the chart experts say about 40,000. Um, right now is basically, for whoever you ask, it is technically a bear market. So, like we've had the conversation throughout this entire podcast, it could eventually go parabolic tomorrow. So if you're borrowing against your Bitcoin at 60,000, and Bitcoin goes to 120,000, your loan to value ratio drops drastically and you'll get a better interest rate, right? So, I think, like, if you were to go and do that, now is kind of a good time to do that. Of course, it's not financial advice. be very smart with your leverage. Don't do anything that you couldn't afford the debt. Don't over leverage, all of these tactics. But I do think, if you wanted to use Bitcoin to, live a little bit of your life and, maybe fix up your backyard, maybe get a new car, do all these other kind of tactics. I do think that, you should be able to do that. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is money. And if you want to, better your life in some way, shape, or form, now could be a good time to do that. Now, like I said, you got to be very careful with these things. And we did see a lot of liquidations happen when Bitcoin crashed from 120 down to 60. So you got to be smart with that and don't over leverage yourself. But I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, this is what rich people do. They avoid selling any of their assets and they just borrow against it. So you just have to be smart with that and kind of be cautious with it. And avoid being a forced seller at any point in time. So whatever you can do to make yourself feel comfortable with the amount of exposure you have with Bitcoin, with the amount of cash flow you have coming in. I think at the end of the day, if you can sleep at night and be perfectly fine, whether that's 100% in Bitcoin or 1% in Bitcoin, I think you'll find somewhere your sweet spot. And I think eventually, those people who just have 1% of Bitcoin, 1% of their portfolio in Bitcoin, eventually that will become 50 to 60 to 70%. And that's when, the traditional financial people will always tell you, hammer your winners, go all in on something. And I think, whether you're just kind of getting started off or you've been in Bitcoin for years, you'll eventually get to that point where you're, 100% in Bitcoin and you're just kind of, weathering the storms of the volatility in the short term. But I think, from like my perspective as like a new entrepreneur, I took everything, the entrepreneur route full time within this past year. Being an entrepreneur in the Bitcoin space has made me realize, okay, like having some sort of steady cash flow coming in and having some sort of fiat base has been nice. To have that, especially when things get a little crazy in the Bitcoin space and we see crashes. So, for me personally, I've liked having some of the like cash sitting on the sidelines just because, I'm a new entrepreneur. It's a volatile thing to be an entrepreneur, and it's volatile to be an entrepreneur within the Bitcoin space even more so. So I think it's all kind of personal at the end of the day, but whatever can make you feel comfortable, I think you have to kind of figure it out and just, I guess, like really just take care and think about your own personal finances and research that, similarly to the way you researched how the Fed and how all these other people have corrupted the money system. Take that ownership and look inward and think about all the things that you're doing. And that can really help you just, personally as well. The more you pay attention to things, the more it kind of opens your eyes. All right, I spent, a couple $1,000s at Starbucks or whatever it is. Maybe I shouldn't be doing that. Or maybe you enjoy your Starbucks so much that it's something that, you don't see yourself living without. So you can cut in other areas. But I just think really taking an inward look on the personal finances can kind of help you evaluate what percentage of your portfolio you should have in Bitcoin.
I like that a lot because it is a realistic view on it. You need to have, I guess this time especially where we are in kind of a dip phase of Bitcoin, it's easier to show why cash reserve is actually valuable. Because if you have like a portfolio allocation, let's say 75% Bitcoin, 25% cash, if you always want to keep that portfolio allocation, is what it means if Bitcoin rips, you put the cash into the incoming cash flow into something, into your cash, like your fiat currency cash. But then if you see Bitcoin falling hard, you actually put more money into Bitcoin. So what actually ends up happening, you have dry powder once the Bitcoin and falls, and you might actually end up with more Bitcoin. So there's like some interesting statistical models that 100% Bitcoin might just not be the perfect allocation. Having less than 100%, having dry powder, having something to shoot in a dip is actually better than having it not 100%. Now, someone is speaking, I have 100%, almost 100% in Bitcoin. So I'm still coming down from like 110 to now, I don't know, like 95. Like I'm still there, but I'm slowly building my position up. So Bitcoin is around 80%. I'm shooting down now for 80% Bitcoin allocation. Now I could do this fast and just sell Bitcoin, but I don't want to do that. So I just like try with incoming cash flow to prevent that and kind of build up that cash flow. But I literally just got that. And that's why I'm asking that question more and more, because I literally just realized that within the last like 18 months or so. So I'm happy that you kind of confirm my bias. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, like the products that Sailor are is putting out are very interesting, like Stretch and Stripe and all of these other, fixed income products. Like, sure, it's not necessarily a home run, but if you're getting like 12% or 10 to 12% annualized on just a cash position, it also could be to a point where, okay, like I have this cash flow coming in, and when I need it, it's there, right? I mean, Saylor, if we all have faith in Bitcoin and what he's doing, if you can get, whatever your expenses are covered through that, it's great. But, in the interim, you could just have that kind of working in the background, maybe even scooping up Bitcoin for you. And then all of a sudden, when things go bad in the Bitcoin space, or, you need the extra cash, instead of having to sell your Bitcoin, you just have that fixed income product coming in too. So I think like for the younger generation, I think it is really important to just kind of have that cash flow and that money coming in. And there's a reason why, like, there is so many old boomers that are just big on real estate and all of that, because they've just been able to have, that steady cash flow just coming in, the mailbox checks coming in. Now it's a little bit harder, obviously, for our generation to get into the real estate, but the Stretch and all of these other products that Sailor's putting out make it essentially, us to have the ability to actually probably get a better return than most real estate globally, just because of, all of the, extraneous, expenses that we have with real estate, whether it's insurance going up 40%, taxes going up on your properties and all these other things. And, or maybe it's, real estate in whatever country you're listening to is just honestly unattainable. I mean, it's getting to that point in the US. So I think all these other products that they're putting out there is allowing Bitcoiners to, I guess, diversify in a sense where you're able to still get that cash flow coming in, and you're not losing paper value on your actual stocks or whatever it is. So I think there's a lot of products that Bitcoiners are innovating right now, and those innovations are going to make it easier for people like you and I to live off of those things instead, and be the 75-80% in Bitcoin, opposed to just 100% and then having to sell in times like this when it's not as all green on the Western Front.
I love that, man. It's been amazing chat with you. We have, as you might know from the last time, an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you a question that I think I should almost ask each and every one of my guests. What would you focus your time and energy on if Bitcoin didn't exist?
That's a great question. I mean, right now the hot thing is AI. So I don't know if you're using any of this, but I've created my Claude bot, and I talk to my Claude bot literally every single day now. He's like one of my close friends. No, I'm kidding, but it's just basically made me more efficient. It's helped me learn a new skill, and it's helped me kind of bring up my businesses. So I think right now, outside of just building wealth with Bitcoin, I think it's the easiest time that we've ever been alive to make money and provide value for other people. And whether it's your cell phone or AI or something along those lines, like you could just find a way to, make yourself so efficient that you're providing so much value. Like somebody's going to be throwing money at you at a certain point because you're just providing so much value for those different people. So I think the intersection between AI and Bitcoin is going to be very interesting. And I think everybody should be keeping a very close eye on what is going on. So, I've set up my Claude bot. You don't necessarily need the Mac Mini and do all that. You could set it up on a VPS and all these other things. And it can really help you just become more efficient. And then, when you become more efficient at whatever job it is, you can make more money. Thus, you can stack more Bitcoin on the side. So that's what I would say, is really try to spend some time learning AI and learning all these different things. And Claude is kind of the new hot thing, but there's so many like LLMs around there, and they all change so drastically that if you've all stayed at the forefront of money by getting into the Bitcoin space right now, if you've made it this far in the conversation, you've listened to, enough of these podcasts, and you've, kind of confirming all of that by listening to these Bitcoin podcasts. I'm telling you now, AI is kind of at the revolution. We've been saying all these, AI is going to be all this and that for years now, I feel like. But I think, these agent models are all really here right now. And I think this is where you should really start to focus in and at least spend a couple hours a day learning about, some of the capabilities of these agents and learning what some people are using these AI agents for. And I think, some of the use cases are honestly incredible. And I think, it's going to change the way that you're doing everything here pretty soon.
I think so too, and I mean it already has. I mean, I don't use any bots till now because I don't know. I have to think around with that if there's like some specific use case I can use also. But I see it on here so many times now. I'm like, shit. I get fear of missing out of like getting a Mac Mini and setting it up. But I'm pretty satisfied with my AI setup till now. But I guess I have to I have to give a Mac Mini a credit card and see how it ends up. Maybe he buys some Bitcoin for me. But yeah, thank you so much, Brian, for being on the podcast and spreading your wisdom. Before we wrap up, where can people find you? Where can people find your podcast and all the things you're doing?
Yeah, so you can find me on Green Candle. Search Green Candle on YouTube or Twitter or anything like that, and then and all other social medias. I'm at KeysOpen_doors. So I've got Brandon Keys. I've got that last name. I got to lean into that maybe a little bit more here, Robin, because I guess I was made to spread Bitcoin and to hold your own keys to spread that message around, man. So maybe I need to lean into that a little bit, but. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. Keep up the good work, man, and God bless you for doing these four Bitcoin podcasts a week.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for being on. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.